Whew. So, muscles work differently in order to complete different actions. Sounds obvious, I know, but if we want the body to work effectively and efficiently, we've got to understand how muscles work. Whew. It's Nathan here from Cryotherapy UK Sheffield, and in today's video we're going to be looking at the different types of muscle contractions and muscle activity. So muscles work differently in order to complete different actions and different movements, okay? And we give different names to different types of contractions. So why is this important to know? What's the point? What's the use in knowing? Okay, so if we want a muscle to work at its maximal potential, we've got to train it in different ways in order to get that optimal effect. So for example, you may be training a muscle in a certain type of way, but if you train it in a different way, you may get more benefit, and the increase in strength may generate to different contractions. For example, because you're good at completing the upward phase in a press up and a downward phase doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be good at holding the press up plank position. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the different types of contractions to help you understand the different types of muscle contractions. So muscle can work in one of four ways. So muscle can complete an isotonic contraction, an isometric contraction, an isokinetic contraction, or it can stretch. So I'm going to go through each one and explain each one individually to help you understand muscles' functions. So the first one is an isotonic contraction. So an isotonic contraction can either be a concentric contraction or an eccentric contraction. So we're going to start off with a concentric contraction. So a concentric contraction is a muscle will generate force by shortening. So whenever a muscle shortens, that's when it generates force. So let's think about this in a bicep curl. Okay, so as we are curling up and performing a bicep curl, as you can see, my bicep will shorten. So that is a concentric contraction. So the complete opposite to that is the eccentric contraction. So instead of working when the muscle is shortening, a muscle will contract when lengthening. So if we look at a lengthening technique, or look at a muscle while it's contracting when it's lengthening, this would be the downward phase of a bicep curl. So as I start to lower the weight, even though we don't think about it, the bicep is contracting, trying to hold and control that weight on the way down. So that would be an eccentric contraction. So we have a concentric contraction and then an eccentric contraction. So normally with the eccentric contraction, we also see these based in a lot of plyometric exercises. So plyometric exercises are based on eccentric contractions. So a lot of them work at generating force while lengthening to generate power and complete a contraction. So these are examples of isotonic contractions. So the next on our list is the isometric contraction. So an isometric contraction is where muscle stays at a constant state or a constant length and is contraction. So if we take the bicep curl back into concentration, so we have the concentric contraction, we have the eccentric contraction. However, we have the isometric contraction. So isometric contraction will be where we hold it at a constant length. Okay, so if I was to hold this bicep halfway up and halfway down for around 10 seconds, that would be considered an isometric contraction because the muscle, which is the bicep, is not changing length. So it's not getting longer, it's not getting shorter, it's staying at the same length. So typically when we complete isometric contractions or holds, exercises such as a wall sit or a plank. So the next on our list is isokinetic contraction. So these type of contractions generate a force when the muscle is moving at a constant speed. So these type of exercises are usually favored during rehabilitation programs. So when we see an isokinetic contraction, we usually see this as riding on a stationary bike, using resistance bands, or using other types of machines. So usually there's a mechanical force in play in order to help with these contractions. And as I said, they're really favorable for rehabilitation programs. So if you're injured, this may be a type of contraction that you look at using, rather than the more exerting contractions such as isometric and isotonic. These are a great way to help build strength following an injury without putting too much force and exertion on the muscle. So the final type of muscle activity is a stretch. So this type of muscle activity is where the muscle will lengthen and then relax. So the way to identify this is that the origin and insertion point, so the start and the end point of the muscle, get further away from each other. And after a period of time, the muscle then relaxes and eases off. So stretching is great for warming up and cooling down, and also in rehabilitating injuries. So a stretch can be either dynamic or static. So dynamic is where we are moving while stretching, or static where we are still and holding a stretch. So an example of a dynamic stretch for the chest would be to bring our arms backwards and forwards like this to help stretch off the chest. And a static stretch would be to hold the arm across the body like so. So this is an example of a static stretch. Okay guys, so that concludes today's video on the different types of muscle contractions and activity. If you like the video and you find it useful, give us a thumbs up. Also make sure you're following us on all social media platforms. As always, appreciate you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
You never know what's around the next corner.